So this is potentially really good news for Reading fans, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just been described to me actually as the end of the beginning by someone who I think is very desperate to see a sale go through of Reading, who've had so many problems over the last couple of seasons. I think 18-point deductions all in, often and largely down to a very unpopular Chinese owner, Dai Yongge. As you said, potentially good news on the way. I'll just read you the club statement, which dropped less than 20 minutes ago. That says the club can confirm Mr. Dai has committed to a letter of intent with a potential purchaser of Reading Football Club. The parties will now enter a period of exclusive negotiation to agree the final terms. The completion is expected to take up to 2 months, at which time the purchaser will be announced. The transaction would include the transfer of Mr. Dai's shareholding in the Reading Football Club Limited, as well as the Select Car Leasing Stadium and Bearwood Park Training Ground. The club will communicate with further updates when appropriate. Now, last week, the news I was getting was there's maybe a couple of seriously interested parties to potentially buy Reading. One of those were Genev Associates, which are a company based in Luxembourg. They were at the table for Reading towards the end of the last calendar year, 2023, walked away from negotiations because they had felt that the owner, Mr. Dai, had changed his terms of negotiation right towards the last minute. Another part of the information that I got when it came to trying to get through this process of eventually selling Reading was something that's, I guess, paraphrased in that statement, the difficulty that it is not just one thing.
Yeah.
It is the club, the training ground, the stadium are all off in different little separate parts.
Yeah, because somebody was trying to buy it and then they couldn't play there.
So Wycombe were involved in negotiations to try and buy the training ground. That came out towards the end of a couple of weeks ago. Over the course of a weekend, it then became clear that the documentation meant that the only club that were allowed to train there was Reading. And the training ground itself is something that carries a huge amount of value. It's probably the most significant asset that a potential buyer would take on. So I think that having the stadium and having the training ground as part of the negotiating process is something that has brought the potential investors back to the table.
And just explain for those that don't know why Reading fans would be so delighted in terms of this.
Yeah, well, as we mentioned, he is not a very popular man, Mr. Dai, despite the fact that he has invested more than £250 million into Reading since buying the club, but chased a dream, and the dream didn't come true. Reading have never returned to the Premier League, and the money has been frittered away. There have been times where they've missed paying the HMRC bill over the course of this season. As I mentioned, numerous points deductions, both in their time in the Championship and also now in League One this season as well. Ruben Selles has done a marvellous job keeping them above the relegation zone when you think of all the difficulties that they've been trying to combat. The catering contract has come to an end at the training ground, so the players are bringing in ready meals. There's talk of the fact that the heating isn't on the whole time. There is a swimming pool at this incredible training complex which isn't being used to try and keep costs down. And the big fear for Reading is getting to the end of this month and being able to pay the players, pay the salaries of the staff and pay the tax bill as well, because they want to avoid going into administration, because if they were to lose another 12 points this season, the chances of avoiding another relegation down to League Two would be pretty slim. So if this new owner can get through this process that they're going through at the moment and maybe inject a little bit of funds, then Reading can at least get themselves to the end of the season. Then they will hope, their supporters I'm sure will hope, new owner comes in, new start for Reading.